Hello, and we're back again today with the wonderful JB John Bitting. Official title is the PDA Academy lead at MK Dons and interim manager of the ladies team.
Yeah,
I'm right in saying that.
Yeah.
But more importantly, an all-round good guy, a very good friend of mine, someone I've played football with, I've been coached by, and we've had many conversations over the years with regards to kind of everything we're going to discuss today, and that is kind of how to improve young people in football and how to get the best out of people in football and how to get the best out of ourselves in line with that as well. And I can safely say in all the evidence I know as you, as a coach, as a man and as a friend, you kind of dedicated your life to doing that. And I am so happy and I feel so comfortable knowing that my local professional football club has someone like you within it doing the right things for young men, not young players, young men. And we're lucky to work with many individuals over the years where they've worked with me in the gym and they've worked with you on the football pitch. And there's many success stories that you've been a part of, players going on to play international level, lots of players making it into the first team at MK Dons. Most recently this Saturday with Charlie Waller and Callum Tripp both making their first team debut. I've worked with players like Sam Nomba and David Kasuma who've gone on and played championship level. Obviously we have Delhi at things. There's countless players over the years that you've had a huge part in kind of helping them into their pro career, and not just, you'll talk about the one or two that didn't quite make it, but there's been lots of them who have gone on to make Don's first team debuts and then gone beyond that as well. And that's huge. Congratulations. You're doing something right. But I think you're doing something different as well. And I'm so honoured to have you here today, JB. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. Definitely. I'm looking forward to it.
Good. So let's start. I think we're going to come into, we've got some great questions from some guests today, and we've got some great questions ourselves we want to ask. And we've kind of been leading into these conversations over the previous podcasts and our previous guests as well, in terms of solutions to some of the issues we've talked about. But I want to start with your journey into football, like your playing, your coaching, like what's got you to this point here now, and start from the beginning.
Yeah. So I didn't start playing until I was like 11. I was just into climbing trees and probably in mud. But no, I did start playing when I was a little bit younger, but I had lots of different interests. And then I was working with a person that actually ended up getting me my first coaching job, who sort of said, like, we want to get you out and play. So started playing, enjoyed it, loved it. But I was really quiet. Like, I'm quite introverted myself. Don't really like it all being about me. But I had a bit of a drive in terms of my first ones. I was playing years up. So I was playing a year up, having to deal with that. I'd always been around like older kids, my sister's older. So it was something that I was quite used to. Sort of worked through grassroots football, never went into academy. Then when I got to 16, I went to college, ran a program there with some really top end like coaches. Some of them are working in the Football League now, and they sort of gave me like a bit of a spur to like get into it a little bit more. It was something that I seemed to enjoy alongside the football I was doing. And prior to that, my teachers at school I was always just about sport. I'm dyslexic, so like learning difficulties, I really struggled with the school side. But when it came to like the sport, that was where I felt like I excelled. So if it was running, if it was any form of athletics, football, rugby, that was what I was like fully embraced into. And it just got to a point where I had a few different people that were speaking to me about, look, you seem to like, you're good at what you do in terms of playing sport, and you seem really good with the people around you. Like, have you ever thought about doing teaching, coaching? And I was just like, no, not really. But the more that I thought about it, I was like, do you know what? I might just give it a go. So I literally 15, I started coaching, as in like doing a qualification just to see how it was, which was where I got pushed into it by teachers who were just saying like, go for it. Just see what you think of it. If you like it, great. And then that didn't really take off until I went to college, completed my B like right at the back end of me finishing college, which was really young. I was like 19 when I completed it. And And that just was like my side hustle alongside what I was already doing. So I've worked in schools. I've literally worked across everything from girls to boys. I've done dance, netball, football. Like I've done a lot. And what's that sort of got me to a stage of it's you have to become adaptable and learn and find solutions to the fact that I have 2 left feet.
So not much of a dancer.
100% no. So me having to like teach rock and roll in a class at MK, it was a bit like, so ended up, it was about delegation. It was all around like trying to figure out like how I was going to solve those problems, etc. So did that for a while. And then I literally went back to the college that I played at and became a coach there, was coaching grassroots football, went into non-league. I was playing there at the time. About 24, 25, I got 2 ACL injuries and I've had injuries past that as well. And football just, like coaching just took over. So I had a period of time out, sort of worked through my qualifications. I worked up through MK, been at some clubs prior to that as well. But the majority of the time has been based at MK across 2 stints since 2010.
Yeah.
And like the players that you've mentioned before, like the earlier ones, like the Delis, I was around them, but I never really worked with them. But I got to see the people that did get to work with them. Yeah. And the people that did work with them were like fantastic, just with the way that they brought out a different side of those people, which allowed them to do what he did so early on. And a lot of what we do is we're facilitators. We're there to support and guide and reference things that we might have experienced. But at the end of the day, it's their own experiences that are going to make them see the next stage for them. So yeah, it's been a bit of a roller coaster in terms of what's gone on from my sporting background. But it sort of led me to where I am now. Yeah.
So my first experience of you coaching is we were playing together non-league at sort of step 5. And I remember you putting on a session and I was a naughty kid. Like I just ADHD, just like could never concentrate, like just wanted to just smash balls. And even if I tried my best to understand a just very simple passing drill, it would go in one ear and out the other. I remember you took one session. This was just after your injury. I think maybe I met you when you were recovering from one of your injuries, and I was mesmerized by your communication and your ability to make something fun. And this was non-league football players are lads that maybe haven't quite made it or are kind of working full time in the week. There's some youngsters there. So, and you were still playing at the time. So to get your peers to respect you and to enjoy it. And I remember taking a hell of a lot on from that. So my respect for you as a coach came very quickly, very, very quickly. And I remember something you said at the start of the session. We were doing these short running drills and you stopped us when kind of I felt like we'd only just got started. I was traditionally quite fit. And you said, it's a hell of a long season, boys. We don't want to be tired by Christmas. We'll leave it there today. And it was this ability to kind of care a bit about the bigger picture, care about kind of the individual, care about kind of the value we're getting from that session rather than just thinking, I'll just run them into the ground as a way to show them I'm the boss and everything that comes with that. And so I had this immediate level of respect for you as a coach. And then I got to know you a bit more as a man. And like I said at the start, as I introduced you, I feel so happy that locally, if you're going to be going into the academy at the MK, that someone is there that's going to care about that individual. And I think, Craig, we were discussing even before that we went on air, like your experience of football leading up to, although you weren't at academy levels. How often do we see coaches really care about an individual? We were talking before we went live on air about being scared, about not trusting young players, about that feeling of yourself first. Yeah. And I think what we have in JB is someone who puts the people first, and that was so rewarding for me. But with your experience coming through managers, how often did you have that?
Not very often. I think that's an amazing thing as a player, is to have a coach see you, like we spoke about, seeing who you are. I think we're so driven by results, and obviously football is very fast paced, and you are like judged on your results. And so I think sometimes the person gets lost. So for yourself to to look at that person and see the person first rather than the player, in a sense. I think that allows you to grow. I think that if you take the way, the results there's always going to be results. If you can take them away, build the person first, the results are only going to follow. So is that kind of like a premise that you had through your coaching?
Yeah. So when I was at college, like I said earlier, I had some like phenomenal coaches that I worked with. Like we used to do like 3-hour sessions 4 times a week. I'd be playing twice on a Wednesday, but I'd also be going and playing like non-league, and there was a lot of things going on. Like I got experiences of like A-licensed coaches and coaches that had got success from a non-league perspective, and sort of trying to blend that together. I got quite angry with a lot of it because I felt like my education from the people that I have been working with was very different to the one that I was getting in non-league. But it also came over quite arrogant from my side, where I thought I knew best when actually I didn't know anything. Like being a 18, 19 year old in that environment, like I don't know anything. And I thought I could, like, I was better than the level, when actually, when you look back at it, you go, I was a bit of a dick, if I'm honest. And it was an arrogance thing more than anything, without realising what that person's doing, what he's done, and the successes that he's made, and that's the way that he's got his success. So as we've sort of gone, like as I was going through my coaching journey, I was at another club when I was a younger coach, and it was very much like, do as I say, and that was it.
Yeah.
And if you didn't do what you said, there was a lot of running. So when I went into that environment, I felt like I needed to be the same. And the first part of the time that I was there, I was very similar to the coaches that had been coaching me, which is normal, because that's what you know, that's what you're around. So it did get to a point where I was very much, I was enjoying my coaching, but I also felt like I wasn't being my genuine self. And it did get to a point where I was getting sort of questioned about the way that I was coaching, and going, why are you not helping them during the game? I am. With me saying something all the way through, that's not helping them. That's actually making it harder for them, because they've got someone literally barking or saying something in their ear 24/7, when actually they can play football.
Yeah.
Not at the level that we're expecting yet, but they can play football. And that's something that continued throughout my early stages in terms of me figuring things out. I wouldn't say I was majorly different, but there was just subtle little things that I might have gone, no, I'm just going to remain calm here. One of my things is I don't like being someone that's going to give you like the hairdryer treatment. Yeah. And if I am, it's 2 times in a season. That's my limit that I give myself. Yeah. And if I don't use them, fantastic. But the reason I would use them isn't, I want to see if I can get a different feel out of the players or something else out of them by using a different tactic. I normally get laughed at afterwards, because they're like, well, what are you doing? That is not you whatsoever. But at other times it has had a really good impact. But then it's been an explanation afterwards on why I've done it.
Yeah.
And your point around like the non-league side, the year previous to me and you meeting, I was working in the foundation phase, and I hadn't played for like 4 years. And I just got to a stage where I was like, I want to feel like a footballer again. I want to know what the feeling of being in a change room is, being dropped, starting games, losing games, winning games, and how to manage that. And I went in at the club that we met at.
Yeah.
And the first part of it was like, I just want to play football. And the manager at the time, his son was in our pre-academy. And the conversations at the beginning were like, look, I know he's there. We're both here. Like, there won't be any impact. At this stage, I was having to make a decision on his son in probably, I don't know, it was like 3 months' time. If we were going to like potentially offer, and what our thoughts were on him and where we felt like he was at, etc. So I started playing for this team. I was getting into the habit. I was loving it. I was literally just there to play. Wasn't coaching. So I was coaching at MK, doing all of those parts, and I was just there to play football, and I absolutely loved it. And then I made this decision around manager's son, around like, at this moment, we don't feel like he's where we would like him to be on making this decision. And unfortunately, we're going to be saying no. I didn't play for, I think it was something like 9 weeks after that.
Oh, wow.
So
I didn't know that.
So I didn't play for like 9 weeks, and I was frustrated. I didn't throw my toys out with him, but there was times where I didn't come on the pitch, I would go straight off. Yeah. And it was a bit of my mechanism dealing with that. But actually my reflection a day later was like, if I was the manager and my players just walking off after that. So it was about my learning again. It was like, fucking hell, I've been coaching now for nearly 15 years and I'm acting like this. Yeah. So you sort of like look back at it, and the reflections that I learned from that was massive. And then new manager came in, sort of I called him out on a few things just to say like, look, this is what's happened. I actually spoke and shared my thoughts, and he was like, that's fine. Like, you've got to just work your way back in the team. So ended up doing that, went through the back end of the season. I got injured in a game, which is no shock because that's just me in a nutshell. And I started coaching from the side of the pitch, and the lads were like, we need you to do it more. I was like, this is not what I want. I should shut up, just watch and gone with that. But it changed my perception of it, because coaching in the foundation phase and going back to coaching with adults, which I'd done pretty much the whole time that I'd been a coach since I was like 21. It was nice. I enjoyed it. So we sort of came to an agreement that on training nights, I wouldn't need to train and I would coach.
Yeah.
And we did loads of coaching. I did the sessions, and we ended up going through the run and getting to the end and getting promoted, winning a cup and all of those things. And it was great. It was a nice feel. But the bit that I had to get to a point of, I had to listen to the players. I had to understand where the players were at and what they were looking for and wanting. So it did very much come down to, there was expectations between all of us, which was sort of like mutually agreed. But at the same time, there was an element of that we could trust one another, that we were in it together. And then when Jim came in, the part that I was trying to get across to him was exactly what you mentioned, was to discuss or to understand why you don't need to do loads in your first week of pre-season. Was massive for you to understand that you don't have to go fully in straight away.
Yeah.
It's a building block for us to work through the next 5 to 6 weeks to get us to a stage where, when that first game comes up in the league, that we're ready to do so. Yeah. And by kidding you at the beginning of it, it's not going to make you better for the very beginning of that season. So a lot of it is, and a part of it for that conversation with Jim and the other players that were in that group, was for them to understand more around the why we do something and what that looks like and what that's then going to entail across the rest of this week. Because if I can build them up and say, look, I'm not going to smash you for the first couple of weeks, all of a sudden they're like, that's interesting. Now some might take and go, why not?
Yeah.
But a lot of it, it's more of a case of helping them understand that I want to work with you for a period of time instead of it just being a short time and going, you're not fit enough. I'm just going to run you. There's got to be other things that it could be down to as well. So it's definitely come over a course of time throughout my career of coaching, of sort of understanding the group and understanding where they're at. And some of them, you get a feel straight away that they might not be quite there. Some of them you have to test and see where they're at. But it's definitely it's a two-way street, and they've got to understand the reasons behind it. If I'm going to run you, I'm going to tell you why I'm running you and what the benefits are from it. Because if there's not, you're just looking at me and going,
we're not this guy.
Exactly. You're not engaged. You're not engaged. Or when you tell them, they understand the reasoning behind it. If you just say you're going to run, it's like, as a footballer, you're like, now just like there's nothing behind it.
No.
But obviously for you, then how did you feel being told slow down like there's a whole season?
Do you know what? I respected the person it was coming from. I'd already. It was the end of the session. So I'd already gathered this respect from what he was doing and how he was doing and how he was communicating with me, that I respected your decision on that. Bear in mind, I didn't have the technical ability what other people had there. I just had fitness. I was like, it's my case my time to showcase that. But the way I had a respect for yourself, which is strange because we're a similar age and stuff as well. So often, but you were able to command this respect from me that I hadn't had before. And it was on a level where you had authority, but I felt equal to you. I felt almost like a friend, which I was at the time as well, or we became, but I still had that as a coach. it's interesting listening. There's a few points I want to make from what you just said, and I'm going to come back to kind of what you just said on decisions and the impact on the players you're working with. But I want to just dive in a bit more about yourself. And you talked there about injuries and you laughed and you smiled, but that really and truly, that must have taken its toll on you as a young lad as well, not being able to play the game you love. And obviously that kind of played into the coaching, and in hindsight, that's lovely. But of course that would have taken its toll as well. And I think my question to you is, and we've mentioned this before, to be able to help others, I feel like you have to have experienced or have a shared emotion towards pain or towards darkness or to what the game can bring. And what challenges have you faced personally, as well as injury, leading you up to this point that allows you to help people in the way that you do?
So if I look, like I spoke about earlier, like I was a really keen runner. Like I've done marathons, ultra marathons, done all of those parts. But a lot of those things that I've done, I was like ultra fit in terms of I could run all day. That was like my unique selling point. I could kick it quite well and I could run. And they were probably my only two things. You asked me to do a step over while I'm running, there's a problem. Like the two ACLs that I had, I literally had 16 months out. 16 months out. Got back. I probably came back earlier than I should have.
Yeah.
But it was then me getting to that stage where I was like, yeah, I'm fine. Like everything's fine, without actually really looking into it and kind of going, have I really done everything that I can to make sure that I am fully fine? And 4 games back, FA Cup game, I've gone to turn and it's gone again. And I knew straight away it had gone. But I didn't know the significance behind it. And that first time that I'd been out for that length of time was like, it was tough. It was challenging. There was different things that was going on. It affected my work and all of those parts. And when I'd done it the second time, I was out for 17 months.
Yeah.
So I'd already missed a huge amount of time of me playing it. And this was around quite a key time for me. And I know this was only non-league, but that was also part of my livelihood. I was still getting paid in non-league. I was still doing those things as well. And it sort of hit me quite hard in terms of the second time, because you're like, I'm having to go through this whole process again. I know what's going to be like. I know what's to come. And that hit hard. I had a major injury post that where I got hit by my own goalkeeper, where I ruptured my spleen, broke my ribs, punctured my lung. Like it was like being hit by a juggernaut. And again, I feared going back on the pitch.
Yeah.
That was mainly just from the point of view of the experiences that I had already had on the pitch in terms of the knees, the upper body. And that was sort of a starting point. But part of the reason why I went back into football was I missed that feel of game day.
Yeah.
It's completely different being a coach. Like you still get similar things and similar feels, but it's not the same. And being able to go back into that sort of relight, like I revisited things that I enjoyed from when I was younger.
Yeah.
And it was Saturday, Tuesday, like being around the boys in terms of being in the change room, being at training, all of those things were great. And then I stopped playing. So my job changed. I went into the older age groups, which meant that I was working on a Saturday and I didn't know where I was going to be. So I couldn't commit to football. So that small time that we had met on a training pitch was just disappeared.
Yeah.
And I sort of lost my way in regards to pretty much like knowing what I was. And I felt like I had missed so much that I didn't feel like I was ever going to get that back. So it did get to a stage where I felt very lost in terms of what I was and I couldn't do anymore. And it just added that extra bit of, it was probably a bit of anxiety around it as well. I don't know how I really felt in that moment. It was, and I still feel it like it now.
Yeah.
You sort of go through that stage where I feel like there's unfinished business, but I know I can't do the things that I used to be able to do. And it's trying to find different ways of being able to get that feeling back.
Yeah.
So like last year I did an ultra marathon, and the reasons I did that wasn't anything to do from a physical point of view. It was more to do with the mental side.
Yeah.
And feeling that I don't mind feeling pain. And I actually quite like feeling pain, which is also strange.
I know I know exactly that feeling. I know that feeling.
But I had to go through it.
Yeah.
So stupidly, I've decided to do 2 this year, to feel that exact pain again. But it's not even a pain. It's that exhilaration of going through something that's extremely tough, and extremely hard, and being able to come out the other side and going, I can get through it. It doesn't matter what it is.
Do you want to test your body? Because obviously you've had these injuries, like major injuries. You say it's like unresolved. Do you feel like you want to push your body to show that how resilient it is?
Yeah, and I think I feel like that resilience that you have to go through to go and go through, if it's not me getting an injury, it's that feeling of mentally being able to get through something that's extremely tough. Like you're going to be in a dark place. You're going to be in a position where you're in pain, but actually there's small little parts that you can still push through and get through. You've just got to find ways of doing it. So if that be the people that I ended up doing it, I wanted to do it on my own, the first one. But I had 2 people with me, which was probably a godsend in those elements, because they helped me through it. We talked about stupid things. We talked about serious things. There was times where we were completely silent. There was times where I rang my partner and checked in, and they gave you an extra sort of like feel of, I can do this. And it was very much like that. I do feel like I wanted to experience something that was really going to take me to the edge.
Yeah.
And that's what it did.
Yeah.
And then like from a mental point of view, it was probably 2021. So we'd come out the back of COVID. During COVID, I was sort of in a place where I was like, I don't know what I want to do. Like, I don't know if I want to still play football. It was the first time that I hadn't been around a football pitch constantly through summer and throughout the course of the season. And it was a bit like I've got a son, and it was very much a case, it was the first time that I'd really spent a huge amount of time with him. And coming out the back of COVID, going back to work, my partner Carly had started seeing like a few differences in me, where I just had gone, I think you mentioned it in probably the first podcast that you did, where you were there, but you weren't there. So you're sitting there having a conversation, and something might have triggered me, and I was sort of going to this days. I can remember it was like a Valentine's night, and I'd cooked a meal for her, and we were sitting there. It was all fine, and then she brought up work, and my mind just went blank, and she was like, it was like you were switched off, or you were buffering or something, where you just weren't there anymore. And this started happening more and more, and it got to a stage where I was doing a training session. So I was up with the 18s at the time. I was doing a training session, and I forgot to coach. Like, I forgot how to coach. So I was doing a session, which was a normal session at the training ground. I was delivering this session. I was literally standing there going, fuck, like, I can't remember how to coach. And a couple of days later, I was sort of sitting there, we were doing another session, and I was sitting with one of the lads that was another phase lead to me. And I just went, I can't do this anymore. He was like, what, the session? I was like, no, just everything. And he was like, what do you mean? I said, I just can't do it. Like, I'd completely lost. It wasn't even like the knowledge. It was just, I just lost everything in terms of understanding who I was, what I was doing it for. I didn't feel like I was helping anyone. And all of those things sort of like built up, where it was to a stage where you were a bit like, I can't do this anymore. So the following day, I just rang up work and I just said, I can't come in. And they were in a bit of shock. They were like, what? I was like, I can't come in. I can't talk about it at the moment, but I'm going to be ringing the doctor, and I'm going to speak to them and just see where I can get to and how I feel. And at this moment in time, I can't do it. Like, I'm sorry, but I just can't do it. And then put the phone down. And that lasted 3 months. So I was off for 3 months, did a few different things. There was probably about 3 to 4 weeks where I just didn't do anything. Like, I needed to like recoup, figure things out, like literally stayed at home, didn't do anything. And that was probably too long for that period of time. And then as I gradually started coming out the other side of that, I started figuring things out in terms of working on my own self and figuring out what it needed to look like for me and how that was going to happen, and a few conversations with work. And I sort of ended up getting back into it, and it sort of got to a stage where I am back in. And But yeah, it was a really weird time, and me reflecting back on it now, it was a lot of it was I sort of miss being that person that could literally do everything.
Yeah.
A person that could go and run nearly like a sub 3 hour marathon, a person that could play 3 games a week and still be able to walk at the end of it.
Mm.
And that stopped.
Yeah.
And I think that was the big thing for me was it wasn't just impacting myself, but it was impacting the people around me, including my son, my partner, like my family. And it was just a really weird, but sort of like eye-opening time to like be going through and try and figure a lot of things out. And a lot of this had probably just built up through the injuries where I probably dealt with them and just got through them and was like, I know I have to get to this, and I did it, completed it, got through it. But I think it had just got to a stage where the injuries, the coaching, the expectation on you, the being a dad, all of those things sort of just accumulate into one, and then just they've got nowhere to go and they just explode. And that's where everything started coming out. So yeah, it's definitely like from a physical point of view, it was challenging as I was going through, and it was nice because I still was in football. So I never felt like I was really out of it. But actually thinking about it further down the line, it probably had a bit of a mental scar on me, and for a different reason than I was expecting, really.
I felt quite emotional listening to you talk about them. I don't think I'd realised how bad it had got. I remember us talking about you had become a bit disillusioned with football. I don't think you were maybe even willing to tell me how bad it had got at the time, maybe. I remember you being disillusioned, and I remember you being signed off. And I remember worrying about you a little bit, but it obviously got really bad. And something Craig has said to me before I was hearing there is, you said to me, obviously I've talked openly about addiction issues, and Craig said to me, and it really hit me hard, he said, I'm addicted to a drug I'll never get again. Scoring goals in front of those people. And having had that feeling, knowing you're never going to have it again, obviously at the end of his career was damaging for you. But I'm listening to you now as a young man in your 20s who's kind of, fitness has been his thing. Like it's really hard to take. But then I look at the flip side of it, and I'm thinking now, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, I'm so glad you went through that, so you're in the position now to be able to help people the way you did in terms of injuries and the psychological stuff you went through. And also, if there is a God, he was telling you not to play. By the time the spleen.
I did get that quite a lot from different people. It was... Can
I just add it as well? JB's dad is a physio and was the physio of the team as well. So they obviously placed him in the right place.
If I didn't have him, I would be skinned. I would have no money because of the amount of work that I have. So I do put a lot down to him in terms of the amount of support that I've got from it. But when you lose that feeling of being able to do something that you have been doing, and I think that's demotivated me because I don't have something to work towards. It did have an impact on my physical health as well as my mental health. And all of those things sort of like accumulated into one. And because of that, I didn't feel like I was really helping anyone. Where actually I probably was, but in my mind, that just wasn't happening. And it was just sort of like, I'm here, but I'm not here. And all of those little parts, it does take its toll, and it does impact people in different ways, but there is always that one thing that you know that you're never going to be able to get back in the same way. Which is probably where it was becoming a bit of a realization for myself.
I think you fight it, don't you? You fight it because you don't want to lose it, because it's always been you. And I think it's that fight in it, and you go over it so much in your mind, trying to Rubik's Cube how you can keep it or stay with it. And I think only once you kind of become at peace with it and allow it to be what it is, I think that's when everything kind of just settles down. And it's just interesting to see how kind of you rewired your brain and you got yourself back going again. How did that look for you? Because obviously
I had to do a lot of it myself. So there was a lot of it I was writing things down because I never was really a writer. A lot of it was I didn't feel like I could openly talk about it to people at that point. So it was more of a case of my inner thoughts in terms of just writing those things down. And a lot of it was just like how I was feeling today. What were the things that were annoying me, frustrating me? And there wasn't a lot at that time about like what I was happy for, what I was thankful for, or anything like that. It was a lot more how I felt I was, how I felt that others maybe perceived me, and the things that I couldn't currently do. And as I did a few like online courses, I spoke to people like a small amount just to start talking about it. I ended up getting put on some tablets, and the day that I got put on them, there was a family member of mine. I ended up having to save her life.
Oh, wow.
Literally the day that I got put on these tablets, and it was the first time I actually felt like I had done something for someone, and it gave me that lease of life again, which was strange.
Wow.
I've got home at like probably 12 o'clock at night. I'd been out for nearly like 3 hours looking for her. Ended up finding her in a really bad place, like overdose, like nearly trying to take her life. And I literally found her down the side of a road, which no one, if I had come the other way, which I was due to come, I would have never seen her. And it was like, I was going on my way home. I was like, no, I've got to go this route. I didn't go this route, and ended up going down this route and seeing her car and finding her there. And it got to a stage where I got home and my mum was there, Carly was there, and it was the happiest that I'd been. And they were like, are you okay? I was like, I feel great. Like, it's the first time I felt like this in, I don't know how long.
Wow.
And that was sort of like the start, where I then, probably about a week later, I started going on to a few more courses where there was some other people that had been going through similar things, where I started feeling like I could talk, not about that, but talk to them about like how I was feeling and the things that I had done that had maybe started helping me sort of get back on a route where I was like, I can start socializing and being with the world again.
Yeah.
And it was an exhilaration. I felt like it was a bit of a sign as well.
It sounds, it does.
Yeah.
I believe in that, JB. And we have talked openly about that passenger in your own body feeling. I know that. I know you know that all too well. That imposter syndrome. You were in that position for a reason. And it's very easy for me to tell you now, you were in that position for a reason, and you were being fantastically successful in that position for a reason. And like you said, you've only got to look at the players that you've brought through and the yourself and your own guidance that have gone on to be successful, not just as footballers, but as great young men. And you were still disillusioned to think you were worthless. And I remember that feeling so well, of being in my gym and having a player in there and thinking, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. Yeah. And being like, I literally I've forgotten. And it's really hard. And I went the opposite way. So I just went into burnout. I just thought, I'm just going to keep digging until I fully explode. And I'm really glad that you did what you did and took a breath for a moment, because I think that's what's got you to where you are now. Everything you're telling me there, as hard as it is to hear, I'm grateful it's happened now, because the man that sat in front of me now is so well equipped to help this next generation. So I know that's why we're here today as well. I know that's what we're all passionate about, is changing that, not necessarily changing, but adapting and guiding and influencing people in a slightly different way. The old methods aren't dead, and we're not saying that there isn't time and a place for all of the analytics and all of the performance-based stuff that we're currently measuring, but we're now looking at a slightly different approach on how we look after the emotions and the mentality of these young players that we're coming into contact with. And I think there was a really good question that came through our Instagram in the week.
Yep.
And that was from someone called Matthew Burgess, a friend of mine, a client of mine, and he's another young football coach, again, just at very grassroots level, just his son's team. But again, he's trying to do things the right way. And he asked me, with regards to kind of like a personal, from a parental and from a player perspective, in terms of when winning is the main success metric, yet progress is the only real way of, let me get it up. I'm going to get it up because it's easier for me to ask it from there. He said, as a grassroots coach, how do you manage cultural issues personally from players and parents with winning when progress is more important?
So in terms of this, the best time to do it is at the start of the season, because you're in a place where everything's fresh, everything's new, you're sort of going in the right direction. Expectations and people understanding the expectations, not just within the coaching framework, the players, having the parents involved in that as well, is a bigger buy-in. Because if you've got, especially because you're dealing with kids, so you are dealing with the parents as well, if you get buy-in from them and they understand the reasons why, it's going to look chaotic, it's going to look horrible at times, there's going to be failure, but there is also going to be success, and the success might not come straight away, but it will come down further down the line if we stick to this pathway and this journey that we're sort of going on together. So to do that within a grassroots setting, it's really important that everyone's aligned with the same expectations, the same values, and you have to live and breathe them. So however you want to do that, if it's a case of everyone signing something that we all come in it together, if you don't want to buy into this, it's not a case of you going to be like extradited and taken away. Like if that's your choice, then there is another club out there that will probably suit you, your son, your family, however you want to look at it. The big things is going, what are the main things that we're going after? What does it look like? And explaining the why. So as a club that I work in currently, our big thing is there has been a bit of a flip where performances are really important. There is an element around performance guides and supports around them understanding about the resilience of sticking with a plan, being able to play against various different oppositions and all of those things. But actually, if you can get the buy-in from the players and the parents, the conversations that they're potentially having on like the car journeys home, the journeys to sessions, what they look at when they're watching it from the side of the pitch, how they interact with the referee, how they interact with other parents, other players when something does happen. If we help them with the tools that they need in those moments, there's more likely that they'll understand, no, this is a process. We know that we're not going to win every week, but there's a reason behind it. So it's that explanation of why we're doing it, how we're going to do it, what it will look like. And it's continually to make sure that they understand that process, because a lot of it is a process. A lot of it is a journey that you're going to have to go on. And the nice thing about that is the journey's not always just a straight line. It won't be. And if it is, the challenge isn't correct for that group. There needs to be a time where there's bumps, and there needs to be times where it's tough, because that's also going to help them. And when those tough times do come up, it's not a case of us just talking to the player, helping the parents understand that side as well. Yeah. So how you integrate parents into that journey is really key. What that looks like, it's up to the individual and what that will look like. But it might be check-ins throughout the season. It might be where you just have it all at once. If new players come in, they get exactly the same explanation, and they understand what that looks like. But you have to be consistent with that message that you're sharing. And if you're inconsistent with it, it becomes very grey, and it makes it really difficult for that to happen. So in terms of like trying to answer that as best as possible, like embed it into everyone. Because if you've all come in off the same hymn sheet, it makes it so much easier for you to actually share that message correctly, and they understand what they're doing. And the success will look like success in different ways. If it's not the result, it's other elements before the result. And if you do all of those things, I think you mentioned it about a book that you read, The School Will Take Care of Itself, is the book that like I didn't just learn it from that. It sort of hit home a little bit more, where if you get the process is correctly in place prior to you from the very beginning, it gives you a lot. It helps you to get to the end point in a better way, because everyone's working towards the same direction. So yeah, it would definitely be setting the expectation for everyone and getting them to understand what development looks like over a result. Because let's be honest, if a kid feels great in an environment, yes, the result hurts immediately. 48 hours later, they won't be thinking about the result. 24 hours later, they won't be necessarily thinking about the result. It's about how we can like sort of make them rethink and go, right, okay, that was a situation that I found myself in,
or
we found ourselves in, how can we now move forward and think about what we got out of it? Because there'll be things that they did get out of it that were going to be very helpful towards them in terms of their own development and what they need to do, but how we then move on to the next stage and what that looks like. And if there are people that are still struggling with that, we just have to reset them and just help them through that and guide them through it, and help them figure things out along the way, because football's horrible.
Yeah.
And it can be difficult. It doesn't matter if it's grassroots, non-league, football league. It can be tough.
Chaos was a really poignant word there, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Chaos. When I'm training people in the gym, I say to them, it's gonna be chaos today, because football is absolutely chaos. And yes, you'll have patterns of play and phases and everything else, but no one situation is ever the same.
No,
never.
No.
How do you ready people for that? I was interested listening to that from JB, knowing from your perspective as a father with two young boys, definitely going to be playing football at some stage. And obviously the work you do currently as a coach at this moment in time, it's obviously at youth level, you embed that within the parents and within the player. Do you have an opportunity to do that currently at adult level from your experience so far? Have you been part of a team where there has been a process embedded where that was above the result to begin with, or was it just results?
I think it's always been results.
Yeah, I knew the answer.
Yeah, it's never changed. Obviously, it's a business. It's that first and foremost is the most important thing. But as I think we were discussing here, is the step-by-step process is really important. There is obviously, I think at the top level, you don't have much time at the top level. Like it is literally, as for a manager, it's you got to come in, try and implement something and get off as quick as you possibly can. I think at youth level, I think that's where it has to start really. I think there needs to be a change more than you want a goal, you want to set a goal, but you want, as you said, steps, a process that all the players understand is what you're doing and why you're doing it. The why is so important. If you know why you're doing it, then you buy into it more. And I love the fact that you get the parents involved and tell them what's going on, because I think for me as a father, and I watch the football and I know this is what you're setting out, I can then, if obviously with Jude and Mason, as they get older, I can be in the background, like saying, no, this is what the manager's looking for. These are the processes we're making. Obviously, we want to get to here, but this is what we can follow. And I think if he starts at the bottom in the academies and they can build that, then ultimately, hopefully, that will filter into the first teams as these players get older. They'll understand the process orientated. The managers that are probably training youth team levels who step into the first team levels have the process is set out, so it flows. So it's kind of built from the foundation. I don't think you can go from the top and build down. It's got to be built from the bottom, built up, and everything has to change. The way of thinking, everything has to change from the bottom. And I think slowly that will be implemented. It might take time because everything does in football, but like we had GPSs, yoga, all these things. They come into football and you think, oh my God, what are these? But over time, they become the norm. The norm. So it's just making it the norm.
But to do that and make them the norm, you've got to understand why it's been done. Yes. You? So like if you're doing it at the top end, I still think it can be done. It will be different. It will look different because you've got to find a way of making small wins instead of it being a longer process, which that's what development is. There's a process behind it. There's a bigger journey at the very top. So like, for example, like when you've come into it, you've gone into the top quite quickly because you didn't come through the academy. I know you were in like non-league and did those parts, but for your journey, you haven't had those things. I know it was different at that time, but those things implemented in the same way. So it would have looked very different for you. And there's more players that are doing that now, coming through the non-league route, not necessarily coming through academies, or have had time in academy, but it might have been very short and then come out of it and then gone back into like the professional game a little bit later on. I think it's, if you can be able to explain and them understand and then buy into it, because that's the biggest thing. You've got to have buy-in from them. You've got to find a way of getting them to buy into what you're doing. And to do that, you've got to be good at communicating with them and sharing your point. And if that means sharing it through a story, if that means sharing it through your experiences, which links into the story, I think you've got a bigger way of potentially getting them to buy into it. And if it's not just coming from you and it's coming from one or two others on top of that, all of a sudden you're creating an opportunity where you're coming at it from different sides, from different points of view, but even though you're coming from different ways, you're still working to the way that you want them to understand and get to as well.
Yeah, I've noticed at Woking, to be fair, that the manager has come in and given the players like confidence. I think he has set out a bit of how he wants, but he's given them confidence to kind of make mistakes and not worry. Obviously, there's a way we want to play, but be confident in doing that. So I think, as you said, it's going to take time, and it might look differently. But I think there is, building up from the bottom. I think is really important, and obviously the job you're doing and getting these young players to understand that, I think gives them a better chance to then stepping into the first teams and being successful.
Definitely.
I was watching the new Liverpool documentary over the weekend on Prime about Jurgen Klopp's last season, and David Wagner, his best friend, I don't know if he's managing anywhere at the moment, but he talks about Jurgen Klopp's earlier years at Dortmund, and he said he just completely rewrote the script in terms of, I didn't realise how young his team was at Dortmund. He just brought in young players and said, the two things he said that Wagner was saying he got them to do was make them not afraid to be mistakes and to make them run like hell. And he said, I can't really tell you what else he was saying. He said, I made sure they didn't care about making mistakes and I made them run like hell. And there's so much beauty in that simplicity in terms of football is about, there's so much information. We had questions come through the Instagram about people wanted to ask you about analytics and how much you use them in your coaching and in your kind of the pre-match, post-match, whatever else. And I know there'll be a time and a place for them for you. I know running data is important. I know all that stuff. But how do we measure giving someone the freedom to make a mistake? How do we measure, or how do we give them that? How do you give them that? How do you say to a central midfield player who's just got the ball and lost it 3 times in a row, how do you give them that safe space to say, go get it again? Like what is it you're doing?
I think it's down to your mannerisms, the way that you are. If all of a sudden they're making a mistake and they can see, because I don't care what anyone says, if you see a manager making certain movements after you've done something wrong, you can feel it. You don't even have to see it, you can feel it. It's an energy feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's really important that there's times to be animated, but if you're going to have an environment where you want them to be fearless and have the courage to do the things that you're asking them to do, which is make mistakes, be confident at making mistakes, but knowing the reasons why you're making the mistakes is going to make you better. It's going to give you loads of repetition. It's going to give you loads of opportunities to learn what works and what doesn't, and figure you out and figure different opponents out, all of those things. I think it's from that element, it's how we are as people that are supporting these young people to be in that scenario, is to be what we should be on the side of the pitch. Yeah. Because if I'm a shouter, if I'm a person that's going to show loads of animation of like anger, frustration, everything, if you're making a mistake, you're not going to keep on wanting to make that mistake. And then that's going to feed off on the players around them as well, which also is going to have it's going to create a difficult environment for him to actually do that. So to do that, it's before you even get onto the pitch. There's a lot of things that you've got to do that they feel like it's a safe space that they can do it. Now, there are external factors where it might be agents, parents, peers. It could be anything that might also draw them to fear. So you've got to try and find a way of getting them on side where they understand that as well. The older that you get, it makes it harder because you don't always see agents. You get them on the phone a lot, but you don't always see them. Parents are in a little bit of a different space because the kids aren't looking up to their parents as much. They're probably looking for external people asking them about like, how am I doing? Am I doing all right? So it's about how you create a rapport with those people that allows them to feel that, I can make a mistake, but I know that if he speaks to me about that mistake, it's not going to be like, you should do it better, because that's not helping them. If I can see a player on the pitch who makes 3 or 4 mistakes, one after another, it might be me giving them a coaching point. It's not telling them that they're doing poorly. Have you thought of? It might be a simple word that just reminds them about like resetting, going, oh yeah, I'm forgetting to do that part. Yeah. So there's a bit of a process that we've got to go through together where pre-season was really interesting. I'll give you an example. Like this season where it was embedding young players into a full-time environment, into training every day, and there was a big expectation on them in terms of like, you're stepping into this environment, you're now getting paid, all of these things that have now been added to you, and we're expecting you to perform. So what we did is we went extremely hard with the games that we played. We just played men's teams, like constantly. And the idea of it was there will be a stage where you are going to struggle, and that's fine. But we've got to go through this together, and it's us figuring you out, you figuring us out, you figuring out the environment that you're now in, and helping them get through that. And then we got to the start of the season and we went on an unbeaten run, which was great. But there was also a cut-off point with that where that stopped and we went through a dip again.
Yeah.
And again, that's still part of their learning. And there was mistakes in those wins, but there was fewer mistakes. In the ones that we lost, there was more mistakes. And that's part of again, it goes back to that part of their journey that they're going through and having to understand and figure things out. And mistakes are always going to happen in football. The team that makes the fewer mistakes or causes the fewer transition is likely going to be the team that gets the ball into the opposition's half more and gets it into the box and potentially scores more and reduces the opportunities of the opposition getting in their half, hopefully. So it's just trying to get them into that mindset where if you're going to make 3 mistakes, can you solve the problem? So are you a problem solver? Can you adapt and figure things out quickly? Or do we have to wait to half time to amend those things? But the first person that it starts with is from us, how we are on the side of the pitch.
Yeah.
Because that makes a massive difference to how it is on the pitch. I'll probably add one more point into that. It's a little bit different playing an academy game where there's maybe 50 people watching.
Yeah.
To doing it when you're at a ground where there's 60,000 people watching and half of them are absolutely battering you.
Yeah.
Every time you make mistakes.
Yeah.
It's the people, you're probably more aware of that because that's what you can hear. But actually the people that you know that are on your side, hopefully are the people on the side of the pitch, in the dugout, sort of looking over you.
Yeah. So how do you train that? Obviously, because if you're dealing with young lads who are on the verge of the first team, you're going to go from a crowd of 50 people to then going into a first team environment to then be playing in front of 5, 10, 15, 20,000 people. How do you get them to deal with it? Is there a process that they could implement?
Throwing them into it if we feel that they're ready is one way.
Yeah.
It's not always the right way.
Yeah.
But we try and do different things. So we do showcase games, which just firstly allows them as 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds to go and play at Stadium MK. So play on the stadium pitch, which is a different feeling to playing.
I played in one of them.
Yes, you did. You played.
I did, yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry to interrupt. I remember JB saying, you're going to get ready for playing against men. You remember you brought one of them to Newport. We played one at the stadium and one at Newport.
Yeah.
And I was at a complete I was a nutter at the time. Had a shaved head, just wanted to hurt people. Still friends with JB. Still kind off the pitch, but not kind on it. And he kind of said to his youth lads, this will be a learning experience for you. You're going to play against a man who's going to try and hurt you. And JB had said to me before the game, don't do anything different. Go and teach him.
Yeah, that game was really interesting because you were playing up against 3 very good young footballers, but you were very different to what they experienced. So it was a really good one. And my point to that was don't be any different just because you're playing against younger lads. This is why we're doing it. We need them to experience it. And so we do these showcase games mainly to get them to play in a stadium. When it gets to the FA Youth Cup, which is probably their next biggest thing that they're going to experience or be a part of, it's not the first time that they've done it. There's a bit of a crowd there. I think the highest that we've had there is like 4,500. So it's a completely different feel. Again, the stadium pitch is humongous. And you've played on it. So it's like dealing with that, the environment, the lead up to it, all of those parts. you dealing with the Wembley situation, I know you can't really remember a huge amount about it, but the prep that you did leading up to that game was very much like you would play it.
That won us the game.
Yeah, you played at the stadium, you prep in terms of going there beforehand, so it wasn't something that you had experienced for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a huge part in us winning that game.
The
other team was so overwhelmed when they walked in, and they were doing all their photos and the oh my God, we're at Wembley Stadium, that when we hit them in the first half, the game was done.
Yeah.
They were just shell shocked. That was, and I will always commend the managers at that time for taking us there 3 days before and allowing us to have that moment. And so, and it was an empty stadium, but the kind of that overwhelm and the magnitude of it kind of was allowed to sink in over a period of time. So just hearing about those valuable experiences there, I mean, playing in front of 4,500 at youth level is an incredible way to get you used to.
Playing in that stadium as well. That stadium's amazing.
Oh, amazing.
And I think, as you say, going from on a pitch that's got nothing around it to then something that's got two floors to it becomes a different feel. So I think that's an amazing thing for them to get that feeling. It's like for me, when I was kind of coming through the levels, I think we played like Leicester and a few teams like that. It was like 20,000, and I'd gone through the levels, but it's still kind of overawing for me to go out in front of such a big crowd. And I think for them, kind of going from that like teenage kind of scholarship into a pro, it's that learning, it's these extra bits of football is a football, but learning those kind of how to deal with a situation of going in front of 5,000 to 10,000 people, and learning to how to deal with playing against men is such an important part of their education to then make it more comfortable step into those levels.
Yeah, and that sort of goes back to the next stage where you're talking about playing against men. Like we try and get our boys out on loan. Now, some of them we don't feel like it's going to be right for them.
Yeah.
And that's going to have to be explained to them, but there's reasons why, and that goes back to the why and them understanding, look, this isn't going to be the same route for you, but these are the reasons why, this is what we're going to do instead. So it's having that explanation around the reasons why we will do something and what is right for that individual, because one way isn't going to suit everyone.
No.
So it has to make sure that that's correct for them. So some of them won't go in at step 2, step 3, because they're just not ready for it at the beginning of it. They might go into that further down the line, they might not. But we're just trying to see how they deal with those different scenarios, those different environments that they go into. Like we've had a one this year, which was really interesting. One of the lads that's gone out on loan, all he's ever done is play for MK. So he's been with us since 7, 8, and now he's 18, and all he's done is played for us. He might have played for the school a couple of times, but all he's done is play for us. So him then stepping out of our environment and going into step 4 was a bit of a like, whoa, this is a bit different. And like how we manage those elements. So the loan system for us is quite big. We don't have a 21s, B team, reserves or anything like that. So we class it as an accelerated pathway. So we've had some players that from, like we've had a 14-year-old goalkeeper, we've had a 15-year-old who's now, which is trippy. He made his first involvement in a team in the FA Cup. I think it was against Stevenage when he was 15. Again, he didn't get on, but that exposure of being around the change room, being around the first team, the lead up to it, the prep for it, all of those things, if we feel like that's what a player will need, that's what we'll try and create for them. So we'll find ways of working with the first team to allow them to have that exposure if we feel that they need it. Some get it through different scenarios where there might be a player that's injured, player ill, whatever it might be. So they might drop into the first team training session, and it's just little snippets, little opportunities for them, and then we link that into like first impressions. What first impression do you want to share with the manager, that this is going to be the first time that you have a proper interaction with him? This might be the first time that he sees you. The players might see you. How do you want to be seen? And that's another thing where they're like, I don't know, I haven't ever thought about it like that. And that's part of the experience that we're trying to set them up with, is giving them different strategies behind the things that we're trying to put in front of them. It's tough because not all of them are going to get that chance to do it in front of the first team. So we've still got to make them understand, all right, it's not in front of the first team. What else is it going to look like? So
just on that point, first impressions with a first team manager. Okay. I'm not gonna bore you with what characteristics are you looking for in a player, because I think we would know the answers to that. What sort of characteristics are we looking for in human beings, in these players, is in terms of, we had a conversation outside about when it comes to the decision time, whether that's picking a player to go and get his pro contract, whether it's picking a player to start in a game, whether that's picking a player to come off the pitch, football is always decisions. We're just reactions to situations that arises. What skills and attributes are you looking for as an individual personally? And what are you seeing in the people that are successful? What characteristics do they have? I talked about making sure you walk into a room as you enter and lighten it up, and make sure you light up as you leave. I like the fundamentals of being a good person will have an effect on your career at some point. You're not just so talented that you can go around behaving how you want to behave. It's very, very, very rare that is the case, and you have an extreme talent for that to even be allowed. So what are you looking for in these as men, as young people? What characteristics do you want in your team?
You've pretty much got to be like a chameleon. You've got to be able to adapt to the environment that you're going into, and that's harder for some, and for some it's a breeze. It's like it's easy. They're able to go in and communicate with different age and different experiences of different people. Being a good person it gives you a bit of an upper hand.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying being a maverick's the wrong thing to be and being a dick and doing all of those things, but you've got to be able to match that. If you're going into that environment, you have to match it with backing up with who you are. So we talk a bit around like the differences between being arrogant and being confident.
Yeah, there's a huge difference.
And them understanding that side. I don't mind someone that's arrogant because hopefully if they are arrogant, it can be backed up.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite a healthy thing to have, but it's also an element of going right, when it isn't going right for you, how are you going to react?
Yeah.
How are you going to deal with those situations? And that chameleon part that I was trying to say was being able to solve problems or going, do you know what? No, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to be in that environment. So I've had lads that have not played in their natural position when they've gone up to the first team, and they're like, oh, I'm not playing. I was like, and there's your opportunity, and you've all of a sudden shown to the manager, and he will know he's not a wing back. We know that he plays centre midfield or a centre half. But we believe this is his way into this environment and this is an opportunity for him.
Yeah.
But it's trying to get that across to the player where it's like, it's all right. You're not playing as a centre forward and you're playing as a winger. Brilliant. Now you get to learn a different role. And it's trying to like help them evaluate quickly and understand, that's fine. If this means it gives you an opportunity to get into the first team and be seen by the first team, great. We'll help you with it. We'll teach you. We'll support you. We'll guide you as best we can. And it won't just be from us. It's be from the people that are around you that help you understand that role really well. But if they've asked you to do that, there's a reason behind it. And if you're able to do it, brilliant. There's a buy-in from them, which means that you've now got other people on your side that allows you to potentially stick in and around it. There's definitely been different ways that we've looked at it. And right, like you mentioned about the characteristics. Depending on the individual, we use different terminology. There's a couple of ones, which is a real simple one. People think looking busy is a bad thing or being busy. It's not busy. You're doing the right things to help you in terms of like your habits, your discipline, all of those little things that we always talk about. Being busy might be you being the person that goes up to the coach and goes, do you need anything? Yeah. And it sounds stupid, but all of a sudden you've created an interaction with someone and you're willing to go in there and say straight away, how can I help you? Instead of it being the other way around where it's always like give. And that's been massive for some of the boys where that first interaction makes such a difference in terms of them all of a sudden going, oh, you remember that kid Chaz? Like, he was good, weren't he? Like, helping us. And it sounds stupid and it sounds really basic, but it's a real simple way of getting buy-in from the people higher up.
It's an easy in. It's an easy in to saying, can I pick the cones up or something?
I've been accused of being busy in the past. Have you been called busy?
Yeah, all the time.
I've been called busy.
But I don't mind busy people.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds stupid. The busy ones are the ones that are going to be doing their prep before the session. They're not necessarily, the busy word's not, they're actually doing the things that they need to do to allow them to forge potentially a career. The other one, work to separate. So work to separate is used in different terms. So I used it with Trippy, real simple one. What's his unique selling point? Well, now he's 6'4.5". He can,
he's a big boy. He's a big
like
boy.
an antelope. He can run everywhere, but he wasn't always like that.
Yeah.
But what he did have was he had parents that supported him off the pitch. So after a game, when he was younger, they would go and do hill runs. They would go and do TRX. He would be getting all of this support. During half terms, he would go away and do warm weather training. Now, I know not everyone can do that. But what he did, the things that he was extremely good at was he was a runner. He can run for fun. So we tried to use with him work to separate. And the work to separate is, this might look busy again, but we didn't use busy with him. We used work to separate. He goes into a first team environment for the third time, I think it is, with a new manager yet again. So he's had to adapt to different managers. And we've heard that this manager likes people that can run. So it's like, right, this is your way in.
Yeah.
I don't want you to be around the group. I want you to pull yourself away from the group. So don't do what's required.
Yeah.
Don't do what you think is going to be right and stick with the group when you run in. Run away from them. So work to separate.
It's an incredibly brave thing to do as a young individual.
And Jimmy did it.
Good.
Like the points that I was trying to get to him is going, you need to separate yourself from the people that you're in there with. You don't want to be just another number. You need to be someone seen that can do the things that they're expecting you to do or want from people. And if you're able to do that and maintain it, you give yourself half a chance. And that's exactly what happened. Like, I hardly ever saw him that season just because of that foundation that he had built straight away and that impression that he had made with that player. But I didn't turn around to Trippy and say, just be busy. I had to use a different word with him, which allowed him to understand that element of going, work to separate. So what's that going to look like for me off the pitch as well as on the pitch? What does that look like in the off season? Do I have to go and work with Jim to get myself into a position where I'm robust, I'm effective, but mentally I'm also ready?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he did. And there's been other players that have done it similar, but we've had to use sort of like different terminology depending on the character that's going up there and use that as their unique selling point, that opportunity of going, I'm here, and help them stand out and be noticed. And hopefully that also gives them a bit of buy-in from the players as well. Speaking to some of the players from the first team, they were like, normally you get young players coming up, first 2 weeks they can handle it, and then they just go off a cliff because they can't maintain it. But then there was other lads that were able to, and they were like, geez, and if you get buy-in from the players, all of a sudden that can have an impact and an influence on the hierarchies in like the management team as well.
So on the flip side to that, so Trippy, who is a mutual friend of all of ours, and we're so happy to see him doing so well. The environment that he has created himself, but with the support network he has around him, he's going to succeed. I know he's going to succeed. On the flip side of that, and we've all experienced this, a player who has talent and has something, you know that they're within them. Their heart's good. They're a clean-hearted individual. They're a good human being, yet they're faced with other challenges that may mean they're late for training, that may mean they sometimes don't turn up, that may mean you don't get the best out of them all the time, that may mean that they're irritable or distracted, or you get glimmers of what they could be, and then it gets taken away again. How do you deal with that?
So again, I want to get this out there. A lot of the things that go on isn't just through solely one person. If I feel that you would get a better connection out of someone, it's important that I make sure that you're the one that potentially delivers that information. Because if it's always from me, I might not have the same, we might not get on in the same way, or you might not be able to open up in the same way as you might be able to open up with Craig. So it's really important that you recognise who the person is that's sharing the message or how you want to get that message across. So as an example, so if we look at one side, yes, they've got pretty much everything in place. They've got the support from family, parents, they're always at training. They haven't had a huge amount of bumps in the road. The bumps have looked different, but they're not on the same scale as potentially someone that's got like, as an example, I won't use names, but lost his dad at 12, moved down from up north down to here, came into our academy, has a younger sister. You'll know who if he listens, he'll know who I'm talking about. Mum's trying to like manage, like, obviously having 2 kids, wanting to learn and better herself by going up to uni in Manchester like 4 times a week, but also having to get this kid to training 3 times a week in games. So she's having to use other parents as a support network and different ways of trying to make sure that both of the kids are looked after, getting to school, being fed, all of these things, as well as trying to work on top of that. With all of that, moving down here, kid having to get used to being in a new environment. 6 in the area, I can't remember if he would have been going into, if he would still be in middle school or if he was going to senior school at that point. So there's a big change in that moment for him as well. So he's obviously starting to go through puberty. He's now going through a huge amount of like changes in himself. Very talented kid, very attack-minded. Again, doesn't like, he's fine with making mistakes and he just keeps going. But you've got to sometimes rein him in a little bit and sort of get him calmed back down and him understanding what it's like to work within a team, because moving from foundation phase into the YD phase is very much like you're again going into 11v11. So there was a lot of things going on, very technically gifted on the ball, like loves to dribble, and we don't want to lose that from him. Has some really tough times through his academy years up till 16, where there's things going on at home. Obviously, he hasn't got a father figure that's going to be that person that he can go into to confide with around what a lad goes through. And he has some really tough times in terms of like being in the environment, being there regularly, and never really had any injuries, but it was a lot more things that were potentially going on at home. So when you're sort of looking at those elements to deal with that person, you've got to be very aware of them. So again, you're not just going through the kid, you have to check in with the parents. You've got to be making sure that things are okay at home. So having a line of contact with that person, but also what sort of check-ins you have with the child as well. That part's a hard part because you don't want to be on their case all the time. So you've got to pick and choose when you're doing it. So my big thing with him, I worked with him since he was 12 and I'm still working with him, and he's now 20. And you look at the time frame that he's worked over it, we've spent a lot of time where it's been a lot of one-to-one conversations. A lot of the conversations aren't about football. A lot of it's about him, how he's feeling, what's going on. And the more that we have these conversations, what I try to do with him is I didn't treat him like I didn't treat him with like a 14-year-old. I wanted to treat him like a 16, 17-year-old in terms of the way that I spoke with him. So he didn't feel like I was a teacher. He didn't feel like I was giving him a lecture. I wanted to talk to him like he was older than he was, so he felt like he could probably open up a little bit more. And by me giving him that respect of making him feel like he was older, or giving him the respect in terms of giving him a space where he could just talk to me naturally. And a lot of the conversations were just natural. They were just about anything. But what we were doing gradually was just trying to build up different ways of giving me opportunities to figure out what his cues were, what are the things that make him tick, what he's struggling with. Is there anything that I can support with him like straight away? And it was a long process. That's like a 5-year plan that we were working together on without him realising about it. And then because we had done that, when it got to being on the pitch, you can be a little bit tougher with him. He understands where it's coming from. Post-game, you're obviously debriefing it with him and going, do you understand why I talked to you like that? Or why that occurred and I had to speak to you in that way? Or do you understand that bit of information that I'm giving you? And then that became a completely different conversation. How we utilised the people that were supporting him from the other families that were getting him in, who were brilliant with him as well. Again, that's another support network that he really needed that helped him sort of stay on the path. So we had other people that helped him survive through it. Because we always knew that he had talent, but it was our biggest thing was, can we make sure that he remains in this environment? Then obviously him going into being a scholar, we've got more influence on him because he's around us a lot more. Yeah. He's had to move into digs, so he's away from family and all of those parts. And that was tough for him because like he wants to grow up, he feels like that, but obviously he still wants to be around his mum and his sister and all of those things. So managing those parts, he's had things that have gone on off the pitch, which we weren't necessarily aware of, but we were aware like there was times where he started turning up late. He wasn't looking after himself in the same way that he was at different times. So again, if you can spot those elements, it gives you a better opportunity to potentially deal with them quite quickly. So obviously then it goes into conversations. Who's having that conversation with him? Yeah. Who's that then shared with, so we can make sure that we're sort of on the same page in terms of how we're going to deal with it. And it became a completely different sort of support for him because he was in full time. We got to know him really well in terms of when things started going a little bit off, we could see it quicker, which meant that we can deal with it better. Yeah. If someone else had found out the information always came back to specific people because we were the ones that were able to then go back to him and support him. It might be through helping his family, whatever it might have looked like. And that continued throughout the time that he was a scholar, which ended up helping him get to the next step. His biggest problem now is we're not always there. We're not around him day to day. And the new people that are in there or have worked with him, they haven't got the same sort of time to work with him as what potentially we had. And their focus is potentially more on the performance element. So our challenge has been and is still, how can we make sure that, again, we help him survive at this moment in time to potentially allow him to thrive further down the line. But he also has to help himself out. So a lot of what we talk to him about is like consequence, positive and negative. Like whatever decision, whatever action you make, there's always going to be a consequence. Doesn't matter what that looks like, there's always going to be a consequence. And him understanding what a consequence looked like, there was celebration, the consequence of something that he did really well. There could be a celebration around it or like tap on the back, whatever it might look like. There was also negative consequences for him. And he had to figure out how he dealt with them, but we supported him along that route. Now it's very much a case of he's getting to the point where he's like, I know that I fucked up. I know that the things that I've done wrong, but I can't go back. And he's now having to build up more credit with the people at the top. And he's starting pretty much from zero when other people have got load of credit and get higher up or more opportunities for him. So he's had loads of things that have like happened to him off the pitch, on the pitch. He's resilient, but at the same time, there's a big element of frustration where he knows where he could have been and where he isn't at the moment. And like he's just now starting to try and figure out how he's going to come out the other side. And I don't think he fully understands that yet. No. And a little bit that he's got to figure out for himself. But there's other times where it's right, we'll pull you in, we'll talk to you, we'll find out what you need to do and how we can maybe help you and guide you in terms of the way that you might, I don't know, approach a meeting with a member of staff. It might be how you integrate and interact with your peers. Yeah. Like all of those little things, we have to continue to help him at. And I think what he probably needed is a 21s before, instead of going 18s, bang, first team, it was just a too big a jump for him. And that's probably where we've got to take learning in the way that we go, right, well, if we approach that again, if we took ourselves 2 years back, would we do anything differently for him to potentially allow him to not just be in a position of survival, but in a position where he could have been potentially selectable and potentially thriving or has a higher opportunity at this moment in time as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, it's just, you're looking at the person. Obviously the football is the football, but you're looking at their background. You're looking at how to put all the bits and pieces together to give them an opportunity to become the person they need to be to become successful. And I think that's amazing. I think that's just that more of that needs to be done. Obviously, I've never been in an academy, so I don't know that side of it. But I think that the things we talk about is seeing the person, is making it individual to them. You've gone above and beyond. You've found out the background circumstances, not just seeing a kid who's come in and who's misbehaving and not late. You've actually gone into depth of why they're there and getting in the people involved. And I think that's a credit to you to be looking at that. And obviously, that more of that needs. I think. I say I don't understand academies because I've never been in one, but that more of that should be done. If it is, then great, because it is the person that comes first. Like we've always talked about here, the person comes first, the football comes second. If you can build that person up, the football and all of that, the rewards exponentiate and go higher. So, no, all credit to you for doing that. That's an amazing way of.
I think that's the bit that you said about like the academy element. There are a lot of, and there's loads of clubs that are trying to put it in place, but I don't think people understand and how big a job that actually is. So if we're looking like a multidisciplinary team, like even though I'm the coach, I'll spend loads of time with him pitchside and around the gym sessions. I might be in educational sessions and everything else. The wider audience of that is like, how do the interactions happen with the physio? Because you know what it's like. Your physio is probably the one that you can confide in the most, or your S&C, in terms of they're the ones that you tend to open up to a little bit more.
They're on the periphery a little bit.
Yeah, and you sort of use them. The educational side, the player care element, that's a big job. Like that's a hard job as well, because as well as we've got it from a coaching point of view, they've got to do it without a footballing part to them. They're part of the club, but they're not the coach. So they've got to build up different rapport with, and a lot of that comes with, they do it with the parents more. So a lot of it's around like parent voice, giving the parents an opportunity to speak about the things that they're unsure of. And this might be a case of going, right, let's see how the parents are feeling at the moment. We pull them in, we do a meeting with them, and that's run by the player care, head of academy, and potentially head of coaching. They take notes in terms of what the parents are feeding back. And then we make sure that they're given the information that they're missing out on and make sure that they're aware of it, because a lot of it is either miscommunication or people have come in and then you don't want it to be Chinese whispers or anything like that. So we have to create an environment where they are up to date with where things are at, what's going on, how we can support them, if we need to support them, what things are getting put in place to support them. And then that creates a bigger bit of work as well. So there's definitely things that are happening. I know it's happening at our club. We've got some excellent people that are working around those elements to make sure that parents are educated, supported, because we've also got to remember, like, the kids can't get there if the parents aren't, or the people that support and guardians, whoever they might be, aren't being supported as well. Because they're the chefs, they're the taxi drivers, they're everything else that we can't be. And they're around those kids a lot more than what we are, unless they're in like a full-time environment with us. So to ensure that those kids and the parents and everything get what they need, it has to come from more than just the coach. And that's like your point at the beginning about the grassroots side, that becomes really difficult because you haven't got an MDT staff behind you. You might have a dad running the line on the side of the pitch. So you've got to try and figure out different ways where you're going to make sure that everyone understands their expectations. The values are still the same, but they're still also educated and supported and going, it's all right that your kid's being a little arse at the moment. That's normal. Yeah, that's fine. He's going through an injury. We can support him with that. How we can guide and support them or show them different channels that they could go down to get that support is really key. And that's a forever like evolving cycle for them to get to a stage. And we know that there's so much more that we can continue, like we could do, but it's trying to figure out how we're going to then implement that and what we'll need as a resource to allow that to happen as well. And a lot of that comes down, it's like, especially the lower end, the resources are just, it's tough. It would be lovely if it's Disneyland at some of the other clubs that we know that have got multiple player cares in place and multiple education support, or the physical support and psychological support, all of those things. It's how we then go, right, how can that be filtered down and supported with the kids that are also in the same environment, just at a club that hasn't got the same wealth as some of the other clubs. And that's the challenge I think is faced at the moment around the academy system, is how we can make sure that they all get a similar experience. Similar experience and exposure as well.
I think the enormity of the issue we have here and what we're going to have to do to combat it is we're becoming more and more aware every time we talk, really, in terms of this in football, and it's becoming more well publicized, which is a great thing, and us having more conversations like this is a great thing. I mean, last year I was honoured to come in and do a talk for the boys just after they got their decisions, and I geared that talk around to the lads that had been given bad news. Bad news, if you will, and my talk was guided around how this was perhaps a fresh start rather than just a no and your career was over. But we even looked at kind of the implications on those people who'd been given the good news, the yes at that point, and what that next entailed. And we could talk for hours now, JB. I'm just conscious about how much time we have left on our tape. Like we could talk hours about the brutality of this system. I think the overriding message I felt in this conversation talking to JB, and I think Craig will feel the same, is we're doing something. And I'm so glad there's people like you involved in football doing something. And it's not going to be solved overnight. And the money isn't there yet to bring in, like you said, multiple player services like this. But I hope we can help keep bring awareness to it. I hope we can keep having conversations about it, and I hope we can still keep making steps forward with regards to helping young men.
I do have one question, sorry.
Carry on.
So, as Jim was saying, he did a talk for the boys that have got a yes and got a no. When the boys have a no and they kind of obviously then leave, how does that look from you and your club? Because obviously I know a lot come out of the game and then they get lost, and you said it becomes an identity. So how do you deal with that? Is there a transition? Do you help them from that side? There's
a lot of prep goes in before that. So even before they've got decisions, I think it's been put in a really nice way. We are helping support and create Jim the person over Jim the footballer.
Yeah.
So footballer is a part of your identity. It shouldn't be your overall identity because your identity isn't always going to be a footballer. So how can we sort of redesign or help people rethink about what their identity is? So helping them around like pathways in terms of careers, letting them understand that as well as football, you can do other things alongside football. It's figuring out what they're going to be. Like I know there's a lot of them that are now like influencers, and they do a lot of things on helping them like younger players or different sorts of players understand around like what a footballer eats during the day. And it's a simple thing. It might be being a PT. It might be working in finance and doing that alongside it, because all you're thinking about is what might happen in the next year. I might get a career-threatening injury, which means that I have to stop. Have I got something that I might be working towards to help me to the next step, while still thinking about the footballing element? So when it comes to like decision elements, we want to make sure that once are done, always are done. So even though you've left, we will always be here. If you want to pick up the phone and call us at any point, or make contact with us through like social media, whatever it is, we will still always be here to support you, whatever that looks like. If it's like we've got one lad that at the moment got released last season, lost contact with us for a little bit, which is probably part of his grieving process. Like he'd been there for such a long time, and he was like, I need to step away. Like I need to have a fresh start, need to step away. But then made contact with us a little bit later, and all of a sudden is like, can you help me with a CV? We're like, yeah, of course. So you've got that support. Others might be like references. Some might go, I've stepped away, gone to uni, had a blast, or I'm playing football non-league. is there any coaching opportunities? Yeah, of course. So there is different ways that players have had support from us. Some of them don't want it at all.
Yeah.
And if that's the case short term, that's completely fine. Like I try and check in with the lads that have been released from the older age groups. Most of them get back in contact with me. There's been one that I've tried like constantly too, but I've got to a point where it was just like, look, he just obviously doesn't want to speak to me, which is fine. I use other lads who I speak to and say, can you just check in with him and just let him know that I'm thinking of him, or like, I hope he's doing all right. And then finding out that he is, it's like, great, that's all I needed to know. But it's that constant part where we have to, it's a process. So across the 2 years, they're aware that that's coming up. We'll support the parents with like information around what release looks like, what being taken looks like, what support you would get around that, how that continues. And then a lot of the time there is a cut-off point where the parents or the players just decide, look, we don't need anything more to do with it. We feel like we're in the right space. But there are other times where it is nice where they do come back and they sort of not surprise you, but you realise that, or they figured out like we are still there and we can help them in various different ways, whatever that looks like. And I think that's the really important side, is making sure that they understand that we know that you've potentially been here for like 10 years of your life already. And it's a big crucial time. You've given sacrifice, you've worked your hardest to get to that stage. And unfortunately here, it didn't happen. But that doesn't mean that just because you're not around us anymore, that you're not going to get supported, and we're not here to support you. And if there's resources or anything like that you can get, then we'll help you, show you where you might be able to pick those things up from. Like Life After Professional Sport does a lot around that, like laps, they try, and we send them to those sessions like every year. We've got the second years going to on either end of this month or the start of next month. And that's just a little bit of an insight in terms of when I go with them, I get to see them who wants to go and do a little bit of like understanding about property investment or, and there's like loads of different things that they can learn off that. And that's a really good side of what we try and put in place post a decision, good or bad, that allows them to know that we are still there for them. And the nicest feeling in the world is when you've got someone that you're still staying in contact with like 10 years later, and they're still talking to you because you know that you've potentially created that connection where they know that they can either confide in you, just have a laugh with you, or whatever that might look like. And yes, it's not right for everyone, but if you do get into a position where you're creating an environment where that is the scenario, I feel like that's a good place to be in.
It's a great place.
I think it's wonderful you say, like how you said this, and football is an identity, and obviously you're giving them that opportunity to realise it is just part of who you are, but there's so much more that they can gain by learning other stuff, and it doesn't take away from your football. It kind of enhances your football. And I think that's, as a player, I think that's just a wonderful thing to have. I think for me, there was obviously issues as I was going along with. If I spent more time having something alongside football, I don't think maybe it would have had the struggle of coming out of the game because I didn't know who I was and like what I was going to do. So I think that's an amazing thing to be putting into place, for them to have that comfort knowing that they can still keep working towards being a footballer, but there's always that avenue. If it doesn't, that's there. And also you guys are there. You've created that culture, you've created that bond with them, so they feel comfortable enough once they have finished to come to you and say, can we do this, can we do that? So I think it's a great thing that you're doing with the Dons, and I think that hopefully there's more and more academies that are doing this, so we can kind of keep attacking this issue of coming out of football not knowing who you are, or kind of having those worries of what you're going to do next. I think it's really a great job you've done, mate.
Hope was the word I had there listening to you. I really felt hopeful. Those changes may only feel small, JB, but they are. It's so nice for us to sit here and listen, because we've talked about some of the problems. It's so nice to start hearing about some of the solutions. And that decision at youth level, or kind of the decisions you're giving, isn't the end of the road. And kind of quite aptly, we like to end the podcast with, I'm going to give you some advice that our last guest gave us. I'm going to ask you for your best bit of advice or a quote or anything you've been given that you can kind of you live by, or is an ethos, or is something that you work with every day. So our last guest, Barry Fry, he'd said the best bit of advice he was ever given, which is really appropriate right now, was Matt Busby said to him, "You're not good enough at this moment in time, but go and prove me wrong." And so often in the cases with the guys that football, it's a no for now because we don't think you're ready yet. But that doesn't mean you're not going to go and flourish in football somewhere else or in life anywhere else. And I know everything you're saying is giving him that opportunity. That no isn't. It's a no for MK Dons right now. But here, there's a world out there for you to come, and that's what we worked on together last year. So, with that a little bit in mind, that was Barry's advice. What's the best bit of advice, or the best quote, or the best ethos, or the best thing that you live by in your coaching that we can end today on?
I think my one is actually from my dad. He always talked to me about not being a sheep and not following the herd, because if you're following the herd, it doesn't always mean you're going the right direction for yourself. So that sort of linked in with my coaching part, where I realised that I was going in a direction because that's who my influences were at that time, where actually that wasn't me. So let's come away from the herd and just be me instead. So he always used to use "don't be a sheep," and then probably the other part for me with the quote around the mental side would be, and the way that I've got to look at things would just, it's the simple one around smooth seas doesn't make a skilled sailor. And that part is like, we've had rough times, but that's equipping yourself in a better place to be able to move forward and grow and evolve. That's really beautiful.
That's really beautiful. The only thing I haven't enjoyed about this conversation is the 1 hour 40-odd-9 clock ticking down, because I could sit here all day and talk to you. I really good, and I think in the future we'll have you on again and discuss those things. But thank you, just beyond thank you. That was wonderful, and I really think that's going to offer hope to a lot of young football players and parents and people involved. That I think that's really going to help them, and I'm really glad there is a you. So thank you.
Look, final part for me would just be like, you two, the stuff that you've done, even I've listened to the first 3 and they've been spot on. It sort of resonates a lot. And when you asked me to come on, I was buzzing to do so. So thank you very much as well.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Cheers.